Well, hey guys, welcome to the Next Man Up podcast. I am your host, Mark Stanifer, and I'm honored to be with you for another episode. Whether you're joining us today for the first time or you've been with us for a while, we are grateful you have chosen to be part of the community that is about being and raising healthy and godly men. With me again today is my new partner in crime, John Gregory. Hey, John.
Hey. What's up, people?
So I'm going to start our topic today with a couple of scenarios or an interesting, maybe what I think is interesting. We'll see if this works or not. But an interesting analogy or lead in here. Have you ever experienced a dude that has just come from the bathroom and he forgot that vital step of zipping up the fly, and you know it and other people know it, but dude doesn't know it yet? You know what I'm talking about? Have you ever been there?
Oh yeah, or they're on stage presenting and everyone in the audience can see something that they don't see. Yep. Been there.
Yep. So it just creates kind of this awkward moment where, right,
Yeah.
right, where said dude is not aware, even though everybody else is. Yeah. Or how about this scenario? This gets maybe a little more dark, a little less comical, and that is the guy tells a joke that's off color, or he makes a statement that is off color or just tone deaf or situationally unaware. And again, dude is missing the cues that everybody else knows what's going on, right? Like you've been there too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the dude makes a joke that is culturally insensitive, but he doesn't realize it as he's saying it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So interesting story that is relatively recent for me. I was on a bit of a vacation trip with my dad and my brother and another friend not too long ago. And we were out to breakfast. So I don't know, 9:30 in the morning, something like that. It was definitely breakfast. And this other group of guys came in, and one of the guys wandered over to our table and just started engaging us in conversation. And I think he was just one of those outgoing guys, although in reflecting on it later, it was probably too early for him to be drunk. But there was this moment of like, are you in full control of your capacity here or not? Anyway, he wasn't really engaging me. I was kind of ignoring the conversation. And then he said something that was deeply racist. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but it took me a while to like translate what he said and realize that's an extremely racist comment. And I made eye contact with my brother across the table, and he's looking back at me like, did he just say what I think he said? And we talked about it later. The conversation shifted. He moved on and went back to his own group shortly after that. But my brother and I talked about it later. And I'm like, had that gone on, I would have stood up and pushed back and said, like, dude, you are out of line. That's inappropriate. But here again is one of those moments where he wasn't aware. The rest of us were, and it just created this awkward moment. Like, dude doesn't get it. He's not aware of what's going on.
You know, this is not quite the same, but there's, is it the Progressive Insurance commercials with Flo? Is that, I know I watch way too much TV.
That's right.
Okay. There's a current, I think it's pretty recent commercial where they're filming in this house. And there's some big name band that's, I think it's like Boys to Men, some older band, but you know, they're supposed to make this appearance, and they bust in the room, and whatever they thought was going to happen didn't happen. And Flo and that guy that's with her a lot in those commercials,
Jamie.
They just sort of look at the band. Yeah, Jamie. Yeah, he's hysterical. They're looking at this band And everybody, it's just stone silence in the room. And they just finally say to the band, read the room, dudes, read the room. So as you're saying all these different examples, to me, it's sort of like, can we just learn how to read the room?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me try to redeem this path that we're on and turn it into the topic that we're talking about. Because I'm out of good stories, and we don't need any more insurance commercials. Although the mayhem ones by
Allstate,
those are pretty funny. I like those. Anyway, squirrel moment there. The topic that we're getting at today, guys, is how your stuff affects others, particularly the people around you, your wife, your kids, whether you are aware of it or not. So here's what I mean. Let me get a little more clear. As a husband, as a father, as a dude, the things that you are dealing with, or the things that you're choosing to ignore or not deal with, or the things that you're not even aware of, the metaphorical, your zipper is down, have an impact on your wife and on your kids. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm coming into this topic, John, I think with probably a bit of a bias toward the negative side of this, the negative consequences, and the scenarios that we've described and stories we've told are kind of negative, have that negative bias. But there's a positive angle to this as well that we should make sure we point out as well, right?
Yep, no doubt, because we can beat ourselves up, of course, about our lack of awareness, but we need to give ourselves credit when we are making progress. And when we are not only making progress in our bad stuff, but when we do have good traits.
That's right.
And those are being seen as well. And so to be, don't beat yourself up too much. Look at the full impact that we're making, good and bad.
Yeah, that's right. So let's keep drilling into this and be a little bit more specific with some examples. So here are some examples that come to my mind. Again, starting with the negative side of this, the negative bias, but things like your anger or the trauma that you've experienced in the past as a kid, maybe. Or your tendency to be a workaholic, or the stress that you're experiencing around money, or the fears that you're dealing with. By the way, we've got an episode coming here in the near future that drills into fears specifically. But those are some of the examples, John, that come to my mind. Again, just kind of random examples of stuff that you're dealing with as a guy, as a husband, or as a father, that is going to impact your wife and your kids just because it's impacting you.
Yes, and as you went through that list, and I'm thinking, okay, what are the current fears that we all are looking at? Of course, you think back over the last 2 years, and I mean, there's tons of them, but I'm also thinking about how we maybe are unaware of what is feeding into those things. Yeah. So if we can be aware of what is actually feeding these different, feeding our stuff, put it that way, whatever's feeding our stuff, that's actually a good awareness for both the positive and the negative, right?
So say more about that. Give me an example of what you mean by what's feeding into our stuff.
Well, media content.
Okay.
So if I'm really, I know a trigger for me, let's say is, let's not get too deep here, but politics. If I know politics is a trigger for me, and I'm either going to fly off the handle, and I can't control that when I'm in a room, and maybe I even less control it when I'm at home because I feel more free to do that, then there's something for me to be aware of. and to zero in on, well, what is that all about? And what do my kids see when they see me responding to whatever I'm watching on TV or reading on my phone, whatever? Um, that's what I mean by what is feeding my stuff, good and bad. I mean, we could flip that over and see
Sure.
what's feeding my good stuff as well, right?
Right. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
that's what I mean, being aware of what is the good and bad that's feeding my emotions, feeding my reactions, and whatever's not good, curb it or actually get rid of it.
Right. Right. Like the choice is there
Mm-hmm.
to not, to some extent. Sometimes things are outside of our control, but the choice is
Sure.
there to the extent that we can exercise that choice to not put ourselves in a situation to be triggered by, like in your example, consuming political media,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
we know that that's a trigger for us for whatever reason,
Yeah.
and we can opt out or learn to minimize or learn to get behind what's really creating that emotional reaction,
Yep.
or what is it about it that's triggering us. But yeah, I see where you're going.
Unfollow. It's not a fun word, but just unfollow, unsubscribe, or, you know, if nothing else, monitor your notifications. I'm thinking all about social media at the moment,
Sure.
but just monitor monitor your your frequency of engagement. You can do that. You can control that.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's also it's also important, I guess, to acknowledge that some of this is more than just, quote unquote anger issues or triggers, right? Like there's some deep wounds that people have experienced that, unless they deal with, are going to negatively impact their family. Maybe, as I mentioned earlier, maybe you experienced some trauma as a kid, and as a result, there's this emotional disconnect within
Mm-hmm.
your relationships.
Yeah.
Maybe there's space that you and your spouse just haven't gone to because of that disconnect, or you don't have a community of guys around you. And so
Mm-hmm.
your son is not seeing what it's like for healthy men to be connected. Like the last episode we did, right? The whole love you man thing, right? Like
Yep. Yep.
if you have not dealt with some of that trauma, it could be an emotional block, or it could be rearing up and creating the symptoms of the anger or the outburst or the lack of forgiveness for offenses that are happening today. I could go on and on. This is just
Yeah.
one example, but I think it's worthy of noting that sometimes it is more than just turning off the notifications or
Oh yeah.
unfollowing. It's going back in the past and really unpacking and healing.
Yeah. Because clearly, from a psychological standpoint, a lot of our surface actions are symptoms of deeper issues.
Mm-hmm.
If we're willing to go there, fantastic. But
Right.
sometimes we stop and just handle the surface and don't go as deep as we need to go.
Because it hurts. It's harder to
Sure.
to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think along those lines, and to give an indication of what's coming in the next episode, pornography or sexual brokenness is also something that
Mm-hmm.
will affect those around you. Again, whether we realize it or not. In fact, the next episode, as we get into pornography, the guest talks about how your secret isn't such a secret. Those around you may not know that you're dealing with pornography, but they can see symptoms of behavioral change that have negative consequences on those around them. And so, like, there again is another example of how the stuff you are dealing with has a ripple effect onto those relationships around you.
Yeah, and as you said that, I think it's good for us to realize that we don't mean to, but we lie to ourselves
Mm,
at times.
mm.
Like, it's just a little. I just looked at it a little bit, and it's not really hurting anybody.
It's not that bad.
Yeah, it's not that bad, and we believe that, and it really is a lie. And there's other lies that we tell ourselves, or we allow the enemy to tell us, and we start believing those, and that keeps us away from dealing with our stuff because we believe a lie.
Yeah. And I think just playing off of that, that's also another example of how our stuff affects particularly our kids. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if they see some, I'll use the word compromise. If they see some compromise,
Mm.
they realize that a little bit of fill in the blank is okay, then that's what they're learning because they're seeing dad model and be the example of this. And so whether that's what you want to communicate to your boys or not, that's what they're learning when there's some compromise like that.
Well, I didn't know we were going there, but that's really strong, Mark, because we're getting into character.
Mm,
Because if I'm really paying attention, and I don't think I should compromise on my convictions or my beliefs, but if I really understand that that is actually what's happening when I start believing these different lies or give myself an out, and I am compromising, now we're getting into some deep stuff.
yeah.
That's really helpful because I don't want my son, I don't want my wife to start down their own avenues of compromise because they've seen me do it. I shouldn't want that. So this is a good awareness for us.
You're making me think of a book that I read last year called Live Not by Lies. And I think the subtitle is a Christian's guide to being a dissident or living a dissident life or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's set in the context of politics and government structure, and it's speaking into where we are in our Western societies today. But I'm going back to the principle, the foundational principle, which is don't cede ground to a lie. Don't compromise even a little bit with something that isn't true. And
Mm-hmm.
you can legalize that and go down the fundamentalism path. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not necessarily what I'm suggesting here. And you can also be obnoxious about it too. But what you're saying, John, made me think of the when we cede ground to the lie, then it just moves us further and further and further away from that core fundamental true or truth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like these little compromises along the way. And again, tying it back to the theme here, what we do affects those
Mm-hmm.
around us.
Yeah. And dang it, scripture's true. You reap what you sow. Man, why does that have to be true?
Right? Right?
Just saying.
So, just again, to counterbalance this,
Yeah.
there is a positive angle here too.
No doubt.
I
Sure.
admitted that there was a bias negative to this, but the positive side of this is as you work through your trauma or
Mm-hmm.
as you deal with your anger and become more emotionally intelligent, become more present in the moment, as you develop these tools and tricks and go through the healing process, those options then become available for those that you're leading and guiding,
Mm-hmm.
particularly your kids. If you've done the work to heal and recover and grow, that means you can then guide your boy, your daughter, your wife to do that same work as well. Yes?
No doubt. and I'm just going to tell a story. I'll tell it as fast as I can. And if he's listening, I won't say your name. But my friend, we were on vacation together last summer, and he had a bad stuff moment in the drive-through at Chick-fil-A, and just went off on this employee. And so he and I had a come to Jesus conversation about that in over the next 24 hours. And he's like, I know I screwed up. Da, 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 da. I'm like, okay. I'm just happy you see that you screwed up, and let's, I'm here for you, buddy. Let's see if we can't work together. Let's be here for each other. Recently, a similar situation happened. We were together, and it was so much better. It was so much better. And I observed it. And so I texted him later and just said, I'm proud of you. You wanted to give in, and you might have just a tad, but nothing like at Chick-fil-A. And he needed to hear that. At first, he didn't want to acknowledge that there was a growth there, but then he came back. He said, you're right. I appreciate that. And I think if we can do that for ourselves, fantastic. But it's also helpful to have that guy around us, or more, however many, to know our stuff, hold us accountable to it, but also point it out when we're doing better.
Yeah.
Like, good job, dude.
Yeah. Take those small victories or large victories and celebrate them.
Yeah.
So I can imagine there's a listener that's like, okay, guys, I see the problem, the picture that you've painted. I get it. I see it. But what do I do about it? Mm-hmm. How do I deal with my own stuff? And I know, John, that's a really big question that is that's without context and without specifics that come with an individual's life. But what would you suggest are some ways that guys can start to deal with their stuff?
Well, I didn't make a list, but the one that's coming to my mind right now is probably going to be the scariest. So ask your wife what your stuff is. You might need to have some good medicine around, or something to drink before that conversation or after it. But that start there. If you're like, I don't really know what my stuff is, well, ask the people closest around you and give them the space that this is safe. This is not going to turn into an argument. This isn't, I am listening. I want to grow. I'm going to put myself in a posture that says, I'm here to learn. I'm here to be with you, and I want to be better. But I probably have blind spots. What are my blind spots? What is my stuff that I trust you because I know you love me? I want you to tell me what my stuff is. That's going to take
some courage,
some guts.
Yep.
Yeah, that's going to take some guts. But if you're ready for it and you really want your marriage to be better, you really want the culture of your house to be better, who better to ask than the people that live with you?
That's right. Yeah. The way I would say it, you provided a how. The what here really is generating awareness. Mm-hmm. And if you are not aware, then you can't begin to make change. You can't work on it. You can't change what you can't see, is the way I often say it. But if your wife, or if you've got a buddy or two, or like, just to play on that a little bit further, if your kids are old enough to understand what you're asking, you can even ask them. Mm-hmm. and create that open dialogue. And again, modeling the ability to receive feedback and to expose your blind spots and then acknowledge them and progress. Like, if you ask your kids, they will not only will you have the opportunity to hear what they say, but they will see you in the process of working through this as well.
Mm-hmm. The idea of just acknowledging you're human.
Mm.
You're not Superman all the time. You're not the holy of holies. You're just not. None of us are. And finding ways that still maintain your dignity. I mean, still maintain your position as the husband and the father, but acknowledging I know I have stuff, and I want to do. I want to grow, but I may not be aware of things that I need to know.
Yeah.
I guess a follow up to that would be, all right, suppose they throw out something you're like, oh, good grief, I didn't know that. And I don't have a clue what to do about that. But then that's when you reach out to professionals who can help with that, whatever it is. If you do have an out of control anger issue, all right, when we need to get with a professional to help with that. Get a team, you might say. I've often told people that a team approach to overcome something is a good mindset to have.
Yeah.
If that's someone that's helping you more from a spiritual perspective, one that's more from an emotional perspective, one that's more from a relational perspective, whatever. If you can find all that in one person, then you're amazing. But odds are you're not going to find that in one person. So look for those people and build your team up. And honestly, this might sound too simplistic, but pray about it. Seriously, ask God, I need people in my life to help me overcome, fill in the blank, help me to overcome X, Y, and Z. And just allowing the Holy Spirit into the conversation. Oh, there's someone that is already on your team.
Yeah.
Hello. Invite him into the conversation. And he may just point out to people you didn't realize were already on your team. And you just need to have a different conversation with them that you haven't had before. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And it leads me to an additional thought here, which is being willing to share your story, not just in the process of asking for help and growing, but also the story of where you've come, and let that be an inspiration and an encouragement to others as you vulnerably share where you've been and where you are. But I think part of this process is being able to tell your story.
No doubt. It's therapeutic. And that might sound like, what? Telling your story is therapeutic. And it doesn't have to result in any next step kind of stuff. That's the agenda. I'm telling my story in order for some kind of next step or action or improvement. Just telling your story is therapeutic. And I would add to that, listening to someone else's story. Learning to be a good listener, man, there's something to add to your toolbox, is just to learn to be a better listener. And you start hearing things about yourself when you're listening to other people. I do. And it reveals some things. Oh, I didn't even realize that that's something that should be on my radar when I'm listening to somebody else's story.
Yeah.
So being in community, being willing to share my story, but listen to other people's stories, I think is very helpful.
Yeah, there's definitely a learning and receiving as you're listening. There's also a giving, and it's giving people the gift of being heard, which it's a phenomenal gift, and it's in just such short supply. It doesn't have to be. It's an abundant resource. We just have to be willing to give it away.
And we can be scared. That can sound scary, right?
Yep.
That I'm going to tell my story. I don't know that I can trust this person with my story.
Yep.
That kind of stuff. So then, all right, determine who your safe people are, who your trustworthy people are, and move.
Yep. Well, I think that covers the this topic, and if we were to share more, we probably would just be repeating ourselves. So let me challenge you, listener, with the typical challenge when we get to this point, which is, okay, what do you do with this? I don't know what your stuff is. I don't know what your background is. I don't know what you're currently dealing with. I don't know what your family situation is. But my guess is if this has resonated with you, then you know what you're dealing with, or you're feeling the nudge to explore it with somebody you trust, whether it's your wife or a buddy who's willing to call it out and tell you straight what your blind spots or what your stuff might be. So here's the challenge to you. What do you need to acknowledge? Who do you need to ask for help? What is it that you need to become aware of so that you can do the work of dealing with it, overcoming it? And then as you're thinking about the answer to that question, what is it and who can help? What's the best next step for you to take? Maybe it's a text, maybe it's a phone call, maybe it's journaling. I don't know what it is for you, but if you think about it for a brief period of time, my guess is that next step will come to you. And then I just challenge you to find the courage to take that step, and then the one after, and then the one after. And you string enough of those steps together, you'll be able to look back and realize you've traveled a ways and you're dealing with your stuff. So what is it that you need to do, and what is the best next step? Well, John, I appreciate you as a conversation partner, your wisdom and insight. Any other last words before we sign off for this episode?
# embrace the journey.
There you go. Well, guys, thanks again for being with us and for being part of this community. We do not take you for granted. We do appreciate you. And we'd love to hear from you. Feedback at thenextmanup.com is where you can get us if you've got comments or questions. We'd love to hear them. And as usual, you know the drill. We will be back same bat time, same bat channel next week. Until then, adios. To send us your comments or questions, you can email us at feedback@thenextmanup.com. The theme music is by Jacob Stanifer at Jacob Stanifer Music, and this show is part of the NRT Podcast Network.